Redditors who rage quit a job without thinking. What was the last straw? Director of a preschool I worked at pulled me into her office and literally foaming at the mouth told me I had no business going to my higher up to report suspected child abuse. Walked out, never looked back. If I'm not mistaken, the preschool is now shut down. Jimmy John's manager wants us running to our cars. Normally I'm cool with that, but it's a busy parking lot and was raining. Tons of cars going 20 miles per hour in between me and my car. So I am carefully walking to not slip or get run over since it was hard to see in rain. Strangely enough, I'm not risking being run over for 5 per hour. The manager just starts ripping into me and yelling at me in front of the staff for not running in the parking lot. Sadly, he didn't realize I wasn't a college kid he could abuse and I snapped back at him. He ended up going into the back because he was about to cry and I let my boss know I won't be coming in anymore and he'll need to cover the 4 days where I was the only driver for 5 hours. Capital I. Worked at a rental car agency for about 9 months. Dealt with nasty customers 24/7 who would demean me, cuss me out, or sob. It was exhausting. One day, a customer gets upset we don't have a specific make model of SUV for him, even though size is the only promised vehicle spec for a reservation, and he spits on me, right in my face. My manager escorted him out of the building but didn't say a word to me, clocked out and never looked back. I think I've talked about this before, but I worked in a horrible toxic pain clinic and all the nurses would fight over the doctor, who was an butthole and gross. He only hired women so every new girl was shunned and treated terribly, like open hostility. It was a nightmare. I quit the day I was shoved away from a keyboard and called a freaking retard when the nurse realized I hadn't turned the caps lock off before she shoved me. I walked out on my lunch, blocked their number and never looked back. Way to keep your cool. I would be hard pressed not to allow my emotions get the better of me. My boss blew out metal dust with pressure air while I was working inside the trunk, grinding off the welds from the car trunk repair. I had full face mask at the time, but inside trunk the air kinda circulated and metal dust shot up to my eyes. I thought I was going blind at the time. When I came back from hospital after getting the metals out, boss went around saying he blew that for fun and I got hurt, then started to laugh about it. That's when I said, "Frick you, I am quitting." I was swamped with a huge line of customers. A couple was problematic and needed a print job done. I stood there handling their attitude for 15 minutes while they explained what they needed. My manager, standing in the middle of the store doing nothing, said in my earpiece, "Can you help them and not just stand there?" When I was clearly assisting them. Even rare customers asked why my boss wasn't helping me as he stood in the middle of the store doing nothing. A few years ago, my youngest sister was the victim of a double murder. At the time of the crime, I was working retail for one of the big 4 cell phone companies. They actually took good care of me during this time. The court process wouldn't go on to start until about a year and a half after. Before the court date, I had left the cell phone company for the biggest cable company due to unrelated reasons. More money. We get the date. But I don't have enough PTO at the new company to cover the expected trial dates. Murder trials are very lengthy. I actually remember crying when I quit because of the amount of pressure I was under at the time. I'm not a big cry guy, so it wasn't one of my prouder moments. Jesus, I'm so sorry for your loss. I hope that justice was done for your sister. I have to have surgery tomorrow and asked my boss to cut my hours down because I've been sick and in pain. Hence the surgery. Instead she put me on 4 OT. That was the last straw. Today I'm going in to return all of the company's gear. This was fairly recent. About a few months ago, just before the summer break, I worked at a local fish and chip shop. The job itself was fine. The pay, for a 16-year-old, was quite good too. The owner, however, was unbearable. He constantly insulted me the entire time I was still picking up one of my first jobs. Because of that, I was on the fence of whether or not to get another job. On a fairly quiet night, I was listening to Pink Floyd on the radio when he suddenly turns it off, walks up to me with my phone in his hand, and says something along the lines of, "I see you using your phone again." And I break it. "The music you like, no one likes." Following that, I calmly asked if he wanted a 2 weeks notice, or if I should leave now. Later, The owner asked why I was talking about leaving in front of customers, failing to realize that he was guilty of a similar crime. After I mentioned that, he fired me on the spot. 4th consecutive day working unpaid overtime. Read 9:30 am to about 1231 am. And I was late to work the next day. Got called in for a reprimand about coming in late and I just flew off the handle. Yeah, I was salaried, but also the overtime was the result of other people in the company just consistently fricking up and passing the buck on my department to make up for their horrible time management. Manager, you know, you do good work, but you can't keep coming in late. Something's got to change. Other people don't think it's fair that you come in late. Me. You're absolutely right. I quit. God, I hated working in advertising. It sucks when they try to have it both ways with exempt employees. My wife had been working with me in a manufacturing shop and was at the time 7 months pregnant. Her job required her to stand in one position for hours at a time. Since everyone knew she was pregnant, no one had any issues with her sitting down to rest in between machine cycles. Well, one day we come in from lunch and my wife texts me her seat has disappeared and she had been called up to the office. Long story short, the supervisor I was butting heads with decided to take her chair because it isn't fair that she can sit with everyone else standing. We both walked out a few minutes later. On top of that, we had been told she could only take a few days off to be with her son when he would be born because she had used all of her FMLA for the carpal tunnel surgery she needed due to the strenuous wrist work needed for her job. Seems like a lot of crappy companies show their true colors when women are pregnant. I worked for a pharmacy for almost 2 years and we had hired a second replacement pharmacist who requested a weekend off each month. Well, when the pharmacist took his weekend, they filled his shift with a floating relief pharmacist. Well, there was a particular one. We will call him Jim. Jim had been a pharmacist for 40+ years and had his own way of doing everything. Long story short, this guy didn't keep up on workplace training, new systems, anything. Instead, he would sit around and work as slowly as possible, and when you asked him for anything he would pretend he didn't hear you. When the customer would come to pick up their script and it wasn't filled, he would legitimately blame the person he was working with in front of the customer, saying X didn't tell me. I told the main pharmacist if they schedule me with him again I'm done. They did. I ghosted that company. For a couple of summers during college I was a dishwasher at a local youth correctional facility. The job sucked, but the pay was really awesome. About $3 more than the minutes wage at the time, and I was able to get free, crappy cafeteria food. Most of the staff really didn't give a frick about the job and the kitchen was always gross. For example, the industrial dishwasher we had was almost never cleaned before I got there. They would clean it maybe twice a month when the supervisor would bother with an inspection. The dishwasher was like a mini car wash. You would put the plates on a conveyor belt and they would go through each section before coming out. That means all the gunk, all the leftover food on the plates, that were usually not even completely cleared off, isn't really cleared off. This is doubly true with those plastic cafeteria trays because the curves on the tray, especially the back, is perfect for collecting gunk. I was completely grossed out by this. All the staff used the same stuff as the kids, so they were eating off of these filthy trays, bowls, plates, etc. So I would always clean the dishwasher before I left, which was super tedious, but completely worth it. It would even work better when taken care of properly. Fast forward to a college break. I think it was spring break, and I decide to pick up a couple of shifts to make some quick cash. It was a standard crappy day. I also had to be a server that day, which is always awful. So come around the end of the day I go to disassemble and clean out the dishwasher and immediately regretted that decision. Like I mentioned, taking apart the dishwasher was tedious and there were a lot of different compartments to it. The most important one to clean was basically where all the trash would go after wiped from the plates, which was like a gutter in the bottom of the machine. As I get closer down to this gutter I can smell that it hasn't been cleaned in a while. It smelled awful. So I take a deep breath and undo the hatch and was immediately hit with literally the worst thing I've ever smelled. I can't even really put into words how awful the smell was. I would imagine it smelled pretty similar to the cum box if it was also home to a collection of putrid dog cheese, rotting meat, and a heaping scoop of pig's crap. I immediately threw up. Didn't even have time to gag or process what the frick was happening. I freaking hightail it out of there and my coworkers ask if I'm okay, to which I answered with a resounding what the frick. When I asked when's the last time someone actually did a thorough clean of the dishwasher, one guy shrugs and says probably when you cleaned it last, which was on Thanksgiving break. I just left, didn't say anything, didn't even bother to grind my back up from my locker. I just left. My boss called the next day to ask why I wasn't in and I told him to frick off. OMG, that is insane. I worked at a small local shop when I was 17 and they said I had to work Christmas Eve, Boxing Day, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. I said I wanted to travel to see my father in another country at Christmas as we'd been separated for years and were going to spend our first Christmas together in about 10 years. I quit the job because family is more important than some crappy job, especially at that age. It turned out that Christmas was the last time I saw my dad as he died a few months later. That's really crappy. I get in a shop that's open on holidays that someone has to bite the bullet, but it shouldn't be the same person every holiday, especially in a string of holidays like that. Look, if I can't have Xmas with my family, then you had better give me New Year's. I was working my first serving job at a crappy Italian restaurant and it was like 3 days before Christmas, so every single night we had a full house with at least one huge holiday party. I was working the regular tables and fricked up on one dish and forgot to note that the pasta was supposed to be gluten-free. The owner of the restaurant was a total butthole but would usually only yell one and be done. I accepted my first round of yelling in stony silence and continue working. However, every time I went into the kitchen, he'd start right up again. I had two of the sweetest old couples come in that night and both of them told me I was the best waitress they'd ever had. And then I'd go back to the kitchen and be told that I should just be a permanent host if I can't write food orders down correctly. As my last table left and I said goodbye to them, I just knew they were the last table I would ever have at that restaurant. I did my checkout and went up to the front of house manager and said I was giving him my 2 weeks. He told me, "You can't quit in the middle of the holidays." I then went to the back of house manager, asked him to come to the posted schedule with me. I counted out 2 weeks of shifts for me, and then drew a line all the way through the other shifts and said, "I'm done after that date." I then went to go roll silverware and other closing duties and the owner walks up to me and says, "Take your crap and get out." TLDR. I got fired for quitting. OP. I'm done after that date. Art's crappy ex-manager. No you. For me it was a literal straw. My first job was the snack stand at the local movie theater. The manager was an old guy who looked down on everyone, especially if they were younger and female. So after a few months of dealing with this jerk, one night it's really slow and I've cleaned the entire area and have nothing to do. He walks by and dumps every straw on the floor and tells me to pick them up. I said F you and walked out. Worked at a restaurant that was completely out of control, like providing alcohol to minors, letting employees blow coke in the office bathrooms, servers drinking excessively on the job, etc. When they started stealing money from my paycheck, I confronted my boss and they threatened to fire me. I stuck around for a while because the tips were really good, but then I had to call in sick for the first time ever after 4 years. My boss drove to my house to see if I was home and attempted to call me out for lying. I explained to her we had lost power at my house because of a blizzard and it was too cold to stay in a house without heat. So yeah, I stayed at a friend's house. I also told her I would not be coming back to work. She then told everyone she fired me and I begged to stay and all that. I got accused of stealing from the cash register at a bakery when in reality I was just paying for my food. Every co-worker told me that I could take whatever I wanted, and no one would ever notice, but I felt bad about doing that. Then they caught me taking my change from the register, and called me into the back room where they interrogated me for like an hour, and then didn't even apologize once they figured out the truth. I quit a couple hours later, but not before helping myself to everything in the store I ever wanted to try. Interned at a local wedding magazine during college. Small office of 3 interns who put the mag together, with an editor who will always be the most incompetent person I've ever worked with. And I've worked in food. Anyway, after months of petty bulls, my car broke down over Thanksgiving. I called the editor, letting her know just in case I was ever late showing up, as I planned to take the bus bum rides. Her response? Oh, your car broke down? You are no longer needed as an intern. Click. B. You did not just hang up on me. I was mad, but I took that call as a blessing in disguise and decided to forget about it. We weren't getting paid as interns, so who cares? 2 months later, a Saturday, I'm relaxing at home when I get a call. Guess who? Hey OP. Listen, I'm sorry about that call during Thanksgiving. My phone dropped it. We're trying to get this month's edition printed, and I can't keep up with all the mail, ads and phone calls. It's crazy here, and the other girls quit. Can you believe that? When will you be back in the office? Readers, it's been 4 years since that Saturday, but even now I can still feel that incredible sense of petty joy. You said I was no longer needed as an intern 2 months ago. I have already accepted a new position elsewhere. My boss doesn't call me on weekends and actually pays me. Lose my number. Click. I ran the books department of a store and worked there for 3 years. I caught the flu really bad 1 year, like I didn't exist for a full 3 weeks. I couldn't eat or move. I just slept endlessly day in and out. At one point my mom came over to check on me and banged on all my windows, including the one directly above my head, but she couldn't wake me. I was that level of sick. I was in touch with my job every few days and sat through the waiting room with a 104F fever to get them medical notes to excuse my absences, etc. They knew how sick I was, so when I inevitably returned, I was slow moving and not doing so hot yet, hardly eating and all that, trying to get back to healthy. I came back to my department absolutely wrecked and the managers laughed telling me they didn't know how to work in my section so they just left it untouched. For the entire time I was out incredibly sick, they had me pick up the piles and piles of heavy books just dumped all over the floors when I could barely stand still. I quit that day. I worked with a guy called Andrew at McDonald's and he had worked there 5+ years before quitting. One day he got into an argument with a manager over whether they should clean the ice cream machine so we could serve ice cream or leave it off and say it's broke and leave it until overnights could do it. Argument snowballed and eventually the manager yelled, "I'm a manager. Do what I say. You're too dumb to even be a crew trainer," which wasn't true. He was in university and was a month away from graduation. This manager was hired about 7 months prior, it being McDonald's. We didn't have many good days, but that day was Andrew's last straw. He calmly walked to the back to where we left our stock, then went to the bathroom. Moments later, Andrew walked out butt naked wearing nothing but his no-slip shoes and his car keys in his hand with his other hand holding a kid-sized cup over his genitals. He flipped her off and walked out the front door and drove home. I was impressed he stood up for himself, but man, come on. At least use a medium cup. Give us the sense of illusion. I was the third developer to hire on at a startup. My boss was a new programmer, but was the IT director by virtue of being an early hire. Pretty quickly he started claiming credit for my work. The final straw was when he scheduled a company-wide meeting to demo his secret project. He accidentally overlapped the meeting time with weekly code reviews and proceeded to run Gish Gallop on me in front of the whole company. He followed with a demo of his new browser cache module. I was pretty steamed at that point and said he just wasted 3 months writing something already built into the browser. I quit when he wrote me up for insubordination 10 minutes later. Been dealing with a pretty terrible boss for the last few years. Just signed an offer letter from a competing firm, which means the next time he asks me to stay late and not get paid for work that I do will be met with my letter of resignation. My guess is I will be handing it to him in the next 24 hours. Update 1. Boz will be leaving on vacation for the next 3 weeks, which means 2 things. 1. I will be doing all of his work for the next 3 weeks, which is what I already do, so it's not actually an issue. 2. I will be delivering my 2 weeks notice by tomorrow at the latest. Update 2. Per everyone's request, I will post an update tomorrow right here. Although I believe I have been mistreated and I have clearly been underpaid in my position, I am actively choosing not to be petty in my resignation. But trust me, I've fantasized about all the ways I could screw this company over. The letter of resignation is typed, signed, and printed to company letterhead in my desk. Update 3. I said I was not going to be petty, but I broke the shredder on accident. I am debating on whether or not I say anything. Update 4. Boss came in late, per usual, and immediately started telling me about the rough day he had. I asked to speak with him in the conference room and informed him I will be moving on. He was clearly surprised and wasn't able to construct much of a response. The only thing he mentioned was how difficult this makes his job because there are a few things that only I know how to do. There was no counteroffer from him or an offer to increase my salary. Not surprised. I am giving him the professional courtesy of interviewing a replacement. He seemed pretty shocked and it's pretty clear that he is worried about not having someone do the essential duties that I perform since I am the only one in the whole firm that knows how to do them. Update 5. This will probably be the last and final update, but I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words of encouragement and luck. After turning in my final notice, I immediately felt more relaxed and much less stressed. My hope is I can recharge over the next few weeks and be able to go into my new job rested, focused, and excited to succeed. It certainly feels good to be in your last few weeks of a terrible job. Worked at a small law firm as a contractor, probably to prevent the firm from paying taxes, offering benefits, paying unemployment, etc. Got a new case assigned to me on my own one afternoon. The next day, the boss has a staff meeting. He proceeds to ask me every detail about my new case, like various deadlines and details. I hadn't gotten much into that stuff yet due to other cases taking priority, so I say some form of I don't know offhand or I'll have to look that up. The boss laughs at me and berates me in front of the whole team. The next workday, I wasn't in for the morning due to a fortunate gas leak in my car. Boss demands that I take an Uber into the office and provide documenting for the car work. Instead, I talk to a family friend that practices employment law. I would almost certainly be legally considered an employee, not a contractor, so I would get unemployment as long as I didn't quit, but got fired. I sent the boss an email saying since I'm a contractor, I'd like to work from home. I'll send you a bill for my time at $XX per hour. Boss replied, saying no, you're no longer needed. Filed with unemployment. They initially denied my claim. I appealed and provided all documentation I had for the whole occurrence. The investigator found that I had been an employee and was fired. My claim denial was overturned, and the boss paid my unemployment until I got myself a much better job. When I was in high school, I worked as a flower shop clown, standing at the side of the road, holding a 15-pound sign, waving at traffic, to entice them to buy flowers. My second weekend, 4 bros in a red Chevette kept driving by every 10 minutes or so, honking and flipping me off. Fine, whatever. They disappeared for about 45 minutes. They came back and hucked a Wendy's Frosty at me. Thankfully it missed. They went around the block and came at me again. I threw the sign frisbee style at their car. It smashed the passenger door and broke the window. The driver dynamited the brakes and came to a screeching halt, and the 4 Bridogs got out, obviously wanting to fight me. Keep in mind, I'm wearing a clown suit. They're chasing me across the parking lot of the mall, and I run past the 2 security idiots at the entrance. I run inside and into the flower shop and into the back. I get changed, take my wig off, tell the manager I quit, and I left. As I was walking out the door, they were still screaming at the security guards and the cops had showed up. I got a call that afternoon saying that my paycheck was being held up because of the damage to the Chevette, and I was banned from the mall. No regrets. My first job working at McDonald's, I started at 15. 1/2. Not sure what the laws are now, but they weren't allowed to have me work full time and I couldn't work past I think like 7 PM. When I turned 16 they were supposed to automatically give me a raise, in the corporate policy at the time. That didn't happen. When I approached management about it about 2 weeks later they apologized and said they would work on putting the paperwork in immediately. It never happened, because new management came in. So I once again asked the new management for a raise, as I was previously promised a raise 2 times. They said they would work on it. Once again never happened. Saw BK was having open interviews on my way home, sat down, interviewed, got the job and told them I could start in 2 days. I was still scheduled to work the next day at McDonald's. Came in, did my job and just started telling all my co-workers I'm done and not coming back. Management easily heard, sat me down, offered to give me a $1.50 an hour raise. I told them my new job was still going to be paying me $1 an hour over that, then got changed out of my clothes and left. The best decision because within a year I was promoted to assistant manager and got another $2 per hour pay raise. Still ended up quitting a year after that due to college. Worked at McDonald's. Manager kept switching employees around but left the tills. End of the day my till was $20 short and there were 3 or 4 different employees who had used that till. She said it was coming out of my paycheck and I told her that I quit. She said I could quit at the end of the week BC she didn't have anyone to cover me. To which I replied no I'm quitting right now. In fact it's already happened and walked out. Joined the army a couple of weeks later. I could deal with the domestic bulls the owners brought in every day but when they wanted me to put spoiled milk in the customer's coffee because that's all we have right now I had to leave. Through most of college I worked for a family that owned a few small restaurants. By the time I graduated I was pretty much managing them. Had no interest in the restaurant business, but they didn't really have someone to fill the role I was doing, and they begged me to stick around while they got up to speed on what I did, transition duties, etc. They were good people, always treated me great, and the dough wasn't bad so I said no problem. The thing was I had also started my real job at that point. So I'm busting butt over there trying to get started on my career, and then would leave there, have to swing by a pizzeria or two and straighten out whatever nonsense they were up to that day, interview someone, whatever. Again, I wasn't miserable or anything, but I was just kind of done with it. So one Saturday morning, after a long week, and then a long Friday night I'm going in to open the store to receive some stuff, because the guy in charge of it had some BS reason as to why he couldn't make it in. I'm hungover, grumpy as crap, and really just want to go back to bed or do pretty much anything other than waiting for a dude with produce to show up. I'm barely out of my car, and a freaking goose comes out of nowhere and, well, it's not the right word, but molests me, comes to mind. After fending it off, I go in, call up the father of the family, who was like family to me and was Anthony man. I can't do this anymore. I swear had that goose not attacked me, I'd probably still be working part-time there to this day, 20 years later, even though I have a great career and family and whatnot. Also that goose would have had a much longer life, because Anthony brained it with a shovel in a fit of rage later that day. The goose tried to goose you and had its goose cooked. I worked at a pet store for 8 years, and I watched the animal care standards deteriorate with each new wave of management. I came in one morning and found 2 chameleons drowned in their habitat, and when I told the manager that it was simply due to negligence he literally said we will just order extra next time. Beforehand I had spent countless hours trying to train the new employees on the appropriate way to do things, and I had approached the manager with suggestions for improvement. It became abundantly clear that he just didn't give a frick. The lack of accountability and the general disregard for animal life was maddening. And let me be clear, I am not one of those people that are absolutely nuts about animals. I just feel like if it is your one freaking job to keep them alive then that is what should happen. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.